The cold, utilitarian lighting of Circadia Group's 15th floor conference room had been transformed into something magical. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling like captured stars, and someone had managed to coax a dozen poinsettias into full bloom despite Houston's stubbornly warm December. Victoria Lopez smoothed down her emerald dress for the 100th time, her hands slightly damp with nerves as she surveyed the buffet table she'd spent 3 days planning. The catering trays gleamed under the soft lighting. Honey-glazed ham, roasted vegetables, artisan bread rolls, and an impressive cheese board that had required 2 trips to 3 different stores. But it was the large clay pot she'd smuggled in that morning, currently warming in the break room, that made her heart race with equal parts excitement and terror. "Everything looks perfect, Victoria," said Catherine from accounting, plucking a stuffed mushroom from one of the platters. "You really outdid yourself." Victoria smiled, though her attention kept drifting toward the door. Alan Melwood hadn't arrived yet. She'd been checking the time on her phone so frequently that her battery was down to 30%, and the party had only started 20 minutes ago. 2 months. That's how long it had been since Victoria first walked through Circadia Group's glass doors, her master's degree from the University of Houston still feeling fresh and improbable in her hands. Her father had cried at her graduation, actual tears streaming down his weathered face, because she was the first in their family to get not just 1 degree, but 2. Her mother had immediately started planning a party that fed half their neighborhood, because that's what the Lopez family did. They celebrated with food, with noise, with the kind of joy that made the walls of their modest home feel like they could barely contain it. The job at Circadia had felt like winning the lottery. A major advertising firm with national clients, a salary that made her mother gasp when Victoria told her, and benefits that included dental. Dental! Her father had spent his whole life in construction, building other people's dreams while his own teeth slowly failed him. Victoria had already started setting aside money to help him get the implants he needed. And then she'd met Alan Melwood. It happened during her onboarding, in a conference room that smelled like new carpet and expensive coffee. He'd walked in to grab a folder, and Victoria's entire brain had momentarily shut down. He was tall, not absurdly so, but enough that she'd have to tilt her chin up to look him in the eyes. His dark hair was just slightly too long to be strictly professional, curling a bit at his collar, and he had the kind of jawline that suggested his ancestors had been carved from stone by an ambitious sculptor. But it was his eyes that got her. Brown and warm and a little tired, like he carried the weight of something heavy but wasn't complaining about it. "Sorry, don't mind me," he'd said, flashing an apologetic smile as he rifled through the cabinet. "I'm Alan. You must be one of the new hires?" Victoria had managed to say her name without tripping over the syllables, which felt like a minor miracle. He'd welcomed her to the team, said something encouraging about bringing fresh perspectives, and then he was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of cedar and the complete devastation of her common sense. She'd gone home that night to the apartment she shared with her younger sister, Rebecca, and flopped face down on their secondhand couch. "I met someone," she'd mumbled into the cushions. Rebecca, who was watching a telenovela and painting her nails electric blue, hadn't even looked up. Dead or alive? What? Alive. Obviously alive. Victoria had rolled over. "He's the CEO's son." That got Rebecca's attention. She'd paused mid-brushstroke. "The CEO's son." "Vicky, no. Don't do this to yourself." "Do what?" "That thing where you fall in love with someone completely inappropriate and then write wedding vows in your journal." "I don't write wedding vows in my journal." Rebecca had given her a look that suggested she knew exactly what was in Victoria's journal, probably because she'd read it. Privacy was a suggestion in the Lopez household, not a rule. But Rebecca didn't understand. None of her siblings did, really. Victoria was 24 and still believed in the kind of love her parents had, the kind that built a life out of nothing, that turned a tiny apartment in a new country into a home filled with laughter and the smell of fresh tortillas. She wanted a husband who would be her partner, who would sit at a table surrounded by their children and grandchildren someday, who would grow old with her in the kind of comfortable affection that came from choosing each other every single day. Was it old-fashioned? Maybe. Her college friends had certainly thought so. But Victoria had watched her parents navigate 30 years of marriage with genuine respect and love, and she wanted that. She wanted it so badly it sometimes felt like an ache in her chest. And Alan Melwood, with his kind eyes and his polite manners and his obvious dedication to his work, had lodged himself in her brain like a splinter she didn't want to remove. So she'd done what any reasonable person would do. She'd started researching. Alan's social media presence was disappointingly minimal. A Facebook account he hadn't updated in 3 years, a LinkedIn that was all business, and an Instagram that appeared to be managed by someone's well-meaning aunt who posted blurry photos of office events. But Victoria was nothing if not thorough. She went back, way back, through years of sporadic posts until she found the good stuff. A photo from 10 years ago, Alan in Bangladesh, grinning at the camera with a plate of biryani in front of him. The caption read, "Just discovered kachi biryani with mutton, and I'm never going to be the same. How do I bring this back to Houston?" Victoria had screenshot that post so fast her thumb cramped. There were other treasures too. He liked hiking, preferred live music to clubs, had a weird obsession with vintage cameras, and once got into a heated argument in the comments about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. He was firmly in the yes camp, which Victoria immediately adopted as her own position. She learned that his father had died when Alan was 17, that his mother Cindy had built Circadia Group from scratch while raising twins on her own, and that Alan had spent the last decade proving himself in the company's European offices before being called back to Houston. She learned that he had a twin sister named Lauren, who ran a nonprofit in Austin and posted photos of her golden retriever with alarming frequency. Victoria absorbed it all like she was studying for the most important exam of her life. When the opportunity came to join the Christmas party planning committee, Victoria had practically levitated out of her chair. The committee reported directly to Alan, who wanted to be involved in maintaining company culture. It was perfect, it was fate, it was possibly unethical, but Victoria shoved that thought into a box labeled "Deal with later." The first committee meeting, she'd shown up 20 minutes early with a color-coded spreadsheet of decoration ideas and a backup plan for the backup plan. Alan had looked impressed. "Wow, you came prepared." "I like parties," Victoria had said, which was true. She'd helped plan every family celebration since she was 12. She knew how to make magic happen on a budget, how to feed a crowd, how to make people feel special. This was just a different audience. Over the next month, she and Alan had spent hours together, reviewing catering options, debating whether the party should have a theme, arguing about the playlist. Alan wanted classic Christmas songs. Victoria had advocated for a mix that included Mariah Carey and at least one Selena song because it was Texas and there were rules. She made sure she was indispensable. When Alan mentioned he was struggling to find a good gift for his mother, Victoria had suggested a vintage camera, something Alan could have bonded with his father over, a hobby he'd mentioned wanting to explore with Cindy. She'd even found a shop in Montrose that specialized in refurbished equipment. Alan had looked at her like she'd just solved world hunger. "How did you—" "I pay attention," Victoria had said, and she'd meant it. She paid attention to everything. The way he rubbed his temples when he was tired. How he always made fresh coffee when the pot was getting low, even though he could have asked an assistant. The fact that he remembered everyone's names, even the night cleaning crew. He was kind in a way that seemed effortless, and Victoria was falling harder every day. Her female colleagues noticed. Amy from Creative had cornered her in the bathroom one afternoon. "You're always with Alan these days." Victoria had been washing her hands trying to look casual. "We're planning the party together. That's kind of the point." "Right, the party." Amy had applied lipstick in the mirror, her smile sharp. "You know, half the women in this office have been trying to get his attention for months, right? Since before he even moved back from Europe." "I'm just doing my job." "Sure you are, honey." The warnings came from multiple directions after that. Karen from HR, usually so friendly, started giving her cool looks in the hallway. Suzanne from marketing made pointed comments about professionalism during team meetings. Even Penny, who sat 2 cubicles over and had always been nice, started avoiding her in the break room. Victoria tried not to let it bother her. She was doing good work. She was being helpful. Was it her fault that Alan seemed to appreciate her efforts? But then the whispers started. She heard "pick me" behind her back in the elevator. Someone left a printed article about women who use men for career advancement on her desk. During a bathroom break, she'd walked into a conversation that stopped dead the moment she appeared, Amy and Susan going silent with matching guilty expressions. It hurt more than Victoria wanted to admit. She'd always been good with people, good at making friends. Her whole life had been built on family and community. This sudden cold shoulder from women she'd hoped to befriend felt like rejection of the worst kind. Rebecca had been unsympathetic when Victoria complained. "What did you expect? You're chasing the boss's son. Of course they're jealous." "I'm not," Victoria had started, then stopped. Because she wasn't she? She was absolutely chasing Alan Melwood with the determination of someone who'd spotted the finish line of a marathon. "Just be careful," Rebecca had said, her voice softening. "I don't want you to get hurt." But Victoria was 24 and in love and convinced that she could make this work if she just tried hard enough. So she'd kept going, kept showing up, kept being helpful and resourceful and exactly the kind of person Alan might want in his life, which brought her to tonight, to the Christmas party, to the clay pot currently warming in the break room that contained her most audacious move yet. The party was in full swing now. The conference room was packed with Circadia employees in various states of holiday cheer. Someone had spiked the punch, probably Mark from IT, who'd been sampling it with suspicious frequency. The Spotify playlist was working its way through a greatest hits collection of Christmas songs, currently landing on a jazzy version of "Baby, It's Cold Outside" that had Tyler from Sales attempting an unfortunate dance move. Victoria kept checking her phone. Where was Alan? "Expecting a call?" asked Diego, one of the graphic designers, grabbing a handful of crackers. "Just checking the time," Victoria lied. "Party doesn't start until the boss arrives, right?" Diego winked at her. "Or should I say, until the boss's son arrives?" Victoria felt her cheeks heat. Was she that obvious? Apparently yes, because Diego laughed. "Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. Though between you and me, I think you've got a shot. Alan talks about you a lot." "He does?" "Constantly. Victoria suggested this. Victoria figured out that. You've made an impression." Before Victoria could process this information, there was a shift in the room's energy. People straightened, conversations adjusted their volume, and Victoria knew without looking that the Melwoods had arrived. Cindy Melwood entered first, a powerhouse in a red suit that's probably worth more money than Victoria's entire wardrobe. She was 58 but looked 45, with the kind of confident presence that made people instinctively step aside. She'd built Circadia Group from nothing, had raised twins alone, and still found time to serve on 3 nonprofit boards. She was, in Victoria's opinion, absolutely terrifying and completely admirable. Behind her came Alan, and Victoria's heart did something complicated in her chest. He'd dressed up. Usually he was business casual at best, but tonight he wore a dark suit that fit him perfectly, his too long hair finely trimmed into something respectable. He smiled as people greeted him, shaking hands and making small talk, and Victoria thought about how easy he made it look. This balancing act of being the boss's son without acting like he was better than anyone. Their eyes met across the room, and Alan's smile widened. He said something to his mother and started making his way through the crowd toward her. Victoria's brain helpfully provided a panicked litany of thoughts. Is my dress okay? Do I have food in my teeth? Should I have worn different shoes? Why are my hands sweating? This is fine, everything is fine. I'm definitely not having a small cardiac event. Victoria, Alan said when he reached her, and her name in his voice sounded like something precious. The place looks incredible. You did an amazing job. We did an amazing job, she corrected, trying to sound professional and not like someone whose pulse was attempting to escape her body. You picked the decorations. You picked everything else. He surveyed the buffet table. Is this all the food, or this was it, her moment? Actually, Victoria said, proud that her voice came out steady. I made something extra. A personal contribution to the festivities. It's warming in the break room. Want to help me bring it out? Alan's face lit up. You cooked something? Absolutely. They left together, and Victoria felt the weight of a dozen stares following them. She ignored them. This was happening. She was really doing this. The break room smelled incredible. The kachi biryani had been simmering since that morning, filling her apartment with the scent of basmati rice, tender mutton, and the complex blend of spices she'd spent weeks perfecting. She'd learned to make it from YouTube videos and a very patient food blogger who'd answered her frantic DMs about proper layering techniques. What is that smell? Alan asked, and there was something reverent in his voice. Victoria lifted the lid of the clay pot, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam. Kachi biryani with mutton. I thought we could use something special for the party. Alan stared at the pot like it contained the secrets of the universe. You made biryani. I did. Kachi biryani specifically. Yes, with mutton. That's the traditional way, isn't it? Alan looked at her, and Victoria couldn't quite read the expression on his face. Surprise? Pleasure? Suspicion? Maybe all three. This is my favorite food in the world, he said slowly. Did you know that? Victoria had prepared for this question. She'd rehearsed the answer in her mirror at home, trying to strike the right balance between casual and honest. I might have seen it mentioned on your social media. That old post from Bangladesh? You seemed really passionate about it. That was 10 years ago. The internet is forever. She smiled, aiming for playful rather than creepy. Plus, I figured if you loved it that much, it was worth learning to make. I've been practicing for weeks. Something shifted in Alan's expression, softening around the edges. You learned to make biryani. For the party. For you, Victoria said, and then immediately panicked. Had that been too honest? Too forward? But it was out now, floating between them like smoke from the pot. Alan didn't seem bothered. If anything, he looked pleased. Can I try it? That's kind of the whole point. She served him a generous portion in one of the ceramic bowls she'd brought from home, layering rice with chunks of tender mutton and crispy fried onions. Alan took the bowl like it was precious, found a fork, and took his first bite. Victoria watched his face, her heart hammering. She'd tasted it herself this morning, had made her mother try it, had even paid her brother Carlos $5 to give her honest feedback. Everyone agreed it was good. But would it be good enough? Alan chewed slowly, his eyes closing. Then he took another bite. And another. Victoria, he said finally, this is the best kachi biryani I've had since Bangladesh. The relief was so intense she felt lightheaded. Really? This is… He took another bite. How did you nail the spice blend? That's the hardest part. Trial and error. So much trial and error. My apartment smelled like a restaurant for 2 weeks. Alan laughed, and it was the best sound Victoria had ever heard. Come on, we have to bring this out. Everyone needs to try this. They carried the pot back to the conference room together, Alan still holding his bowl and eating with obvious happiness. When they set it on the buffet table, people crowded around, drawn by the smell. What is that? Asked Fernanda from accounts receivable. Kachi biryani, Victoria explained, suddenly nervous again. This was her contribution, her gamble. It's a Bangladeshi dish, rice, mutton, spices. There should be enough for everyone to have at least a small portion. She started serving, explaining the dish to curious colleagues, watching their faces as they tasted it. The reactions were overwhelmingly positive. People went back for seconds, asked for the recipe, praised her cooking skills. But Victoria noticed the looks, too. Amy whispering to Susan. Karen raising her eyebrows at Penny. The way several of her female colleagues glanced between her and Alan, who was still eating his third helping and looking happier than Victoria had ever seen him. She tried to ignore it. This was a good thing. She'd made people happy. Alan was happy. That was what mattered. This is amazing, Victoria, Cindy Melwood said, appearing beside her with a small plate. You're multi-talented. Thank you, Miss Melwood. Please call me Cindy. Anyone who cooks this well doesn't have to be formal with me. She took a bite and nodded appreciatively. Alan's been raving about it. He says it's just like what he had in Dhaka. I'm glad it brought back good memories. Cindy studied her with sharp, assessing eyes. You know, he's been talking about you quite a bit lately, says you're one of the most resourceful people on his team. Victoria wasn't sure how to respond to that. I just try to be helpful. Cindy's expression was unreadable. Well, keep up the good work. We need resourceful people at Circadia. She moved away, leaving Victoria wondering if that had been approval or a warning. The party continued. The playlist shifted to Mariah Carey, prompting several people to sing along badly. The spiked punch was definitely spiked. Tyler from sales had started telling anyone who would listen about his theories regarding office furniture conspiracies. Victoria moved through the crowd, making sure the food was replenished, that people were having fun, playing hostess, because that's what she knew how to do. But she kept noticing the looks, the whispers that stopped when she approached, the way Amy and Susan seemed to be having an intense conversation while staring in her direction. Finally, as Victoria was refilling the punch bowl and trying to figure out exactly how much vodka someone had added, Amy approached her. That was quite a move, Amy said, her voice pleasant but her eyes cold. What was? The biryani, Alan's favorite dish made especially for him. What a coincidence. Victoria straightened, meeting Amy's gaze. It wasn't a coincidence. I made it because I knew he'd like it. Right, of course you did. Amy's smile was sharp. You know what we call someone who tries that hard to get a man's attention? A pick-me. The word landed like a slap. Victoria felt her face heat, anger and embarrassment warring in her chest. Excuse me? Oh, come on, you've been following Alan around for 2 months like a puppy. Joining the party committee just to be near him, learning his favorite foods, probably memorizing his schedule. It's desperate. Victoria's hands tightened on the ladle. I haven't been desperate. I've been hopeful. Is that what you're calling it? Susan had joined them now, appearing at Amy's elbow like they'd rehearsed this. Because from where we're standing, it looks like you're trying way too hard. We've all noticed, Amy continued, the way you're always available when Alan needs something, how you manage to get on every project he's involved with. And now this. She gestured at the biryani. It's embarrassing. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. She'd known people were talking, but hearing it said to her face was different. Worse, I'm doing my job, she said quietly. Your job is in marketing, not playing housewife for the boss's son. That stung. Victoria had spent her whole life watching her mother play housewife, and she'd never seen it as shameful. Her mother was strong, capable, devoted. She kept their family together through impossible circumstances. But Amy said it like it was an insult, like caring for someone was beneath them. I don't have to explain myself to you, Victoria said. No, you don't. Amy's voice turned pitying. But you should know that everyone sees what you're doing. You're not as subtle as you think. They walked away, leaving Victoria standing alone by the punch bowl, her hands shaking and her eyes burning with tears she absolutely would not let fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. She excused herself to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and took several deep breaths. She was not going to cry. She was not going to let them see they'd gotten to her. But the truth was, they had gotten to her. Because maybe they were right. Maybe she had been trying too hard. Maybe this whole thing was desperate and obvious and exactly what they'd called her, a pick-me, someone so eager for male attention that she'd sacrificed her dignity for it. Victoria thought about her mother, who'd given up everything to build a life in a new country, who'd learned English from soap operas and raised 5 children in a 2-bedroom apartment and never once complained about the sacrifices. Was that what people thought when they looked at her mother too? That she was desperate? A pick-me? No, her mother was strong. Her mother had chosen her life with open eyes and no regrets, and Victoria had chosen this. She'd decided to pursue Alan knowing it might be difficult, knowing people might judge her. She couldn't quit now just because it got uncomfortable. She splashed cold water on her face, fixed her makeup, and returned to the party with her head high. Alan found her near the windows, where she'd been staring out at Houston's glittering skyline and trying to remember why she'd thought this was a good idea. Hey, he said softly. You okay? You disappeared for a while. Just needed some air. He looked concerned. Did something happen? Victoria considered lying, considered brushing it off. But she was tired of pretending. Some people think I'm trying too hard to get your attention, she said. They called me a pick-me. Alan's expression darkened. Who said that? It doesn't matter. It does to me. Victoria turned to face him fully. They think I made the biryani specifically to impress you, which, to be fair, I did. They think I joined the party committee just to spend time with you, which, again, is true. They think I'm desperate and obvious and… Victoria. Alan cut her off gently. Are they right? She blinked at him. What? Were you trying to get my attention? This was it. The moment where she could laugh it off, could deny everything, could protect herself from potential rejection. Or she could be honest. Victoria took a breath. Yes. Why? Because I… But then she remembered her mother arriving in a new country, pregnant and alone, her father working himself to exhaustion to provide for his family, the way her parents had built a life out of nothing but determination and love. The Lopez family didn't do anything halfway. Because I like you. A lot. I have since the day we met, and I know it's only been 2 months, and you're technically my boss's son, and there's an age gap and probably 50 other reasons. This is a terrible idea, but I like you. So yes, I've been trying to get your attention. I've been trying really hard." Alan stared at her. The silence stretched on so long that Victoria started calculating how quickly she could find a new job, maybe in a different city, possibly a different country. "Good," Alan said. Victoria's brain short-circuited. "What?" "Good. I'm glad you were trying to get my attention." He smiled, and it was the softest expression she'd ever seen on his face. "Because I've been trying to figure out how to ask you out for 3 weeks now." The world tilted sideways. "You have?" "Victoria, you're brilliant. You're creative and resourceful, and you make me laugh. You remember things I say in passing and turn them into solutions I didn't know I needed. You make coffee for the whole team without being asked. You know everyone's names, and you somehow made the party planning committee, which should have been tedious, actually fun." He stepped closer. "And then you learned to make biryani. You spent weeks learning to make my favorite food because you thought it would make me happy. It did make you happy. It made me realize I'm an idiot for not asking you out sooner." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "Victoria Lopez, would you like to have dinner with me? Somewhere that's not the office, where we can talk without 40 people watching?" Victoria's heart was doing acrobatics. "Yes. Obviously, yes." "Yeah?" "Alan, I didn't learn to cook biryani because I have a casual interest in you." He laughed, and then he was pulling her closer, and somehow they were slow dancing even though the music was Maroon 5's terrible Christmas song, and Victoria thought she might actually be dreaming. "People are staring," she whispered. "Let them stare. They already think I'm a pick-me." "Then they're jealous." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you saw something you wanted and you went for it. That's not being a pick-me. That's being brave." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were the good kind. "You really think that?" "I know that, and I think I'm incredibly lucky that you picked me." They danced until the song ended, and then they stood together by the windows while the party continued around them, talking about everything and nothing. Alan told her about his time in Europe, about the pressure of living up to his mother's legacy, about his complicated relationship with his twin sister who'd chosen a completely different path. Victoria told him about her family, about being the middle child in a house that was always too small and too loud and absolutely full of love. "I want that," Alan said quietly. "That kind of family." "That kind of life?" "Me too." He looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "We should probably take this slow, right? Get to know each other properly?" Victoria thought about her parents, who'd known each other 3 months before getting married. "We can take it whatever speed feels right." "Okay. Good." Alan smiled. "Because I should tell you, I'm not great at slow." "Me neither." They kissed for the first time right there, in front of the windows overlooking Houston, with Christmas lights twinkling around them and Mariah Carey playing in the background, and 43 Circadia employees pretending not to watch. It was perfect. The next few months were a blur of happiness. Alan and Victoria dated with the intensity of people who'd already wasted too much time pretending they didn't want this. They went hiking in the Houston Arboretum, where Alan taught her about vintage cameras and Victoria taught him Spanish curse words. They cooked together in his apartment, which was much nicer than hers but had a kitchen that clearly hadn't been used for anything more complex than toast. They attended her niece's baptism, where Victoria's entire family descended on Alan like a friendly tornado, and he charmed them all by actually knowing how to salsa dance. "I spent 2 years in Spain," he explained when Victoria stared at him in shock. "I was saving it for a special occasion." They spent Christmas Day with Victoria's family, crammed into her parents' house with her 4 siblings, their partners, and a growing collection of nieces and nephews. Alan fit right in, helping Victoria's father fix a leaky sink and listening with genuine interest as her mother explained the complicated history behind every dish on the table. When they left that night, Victoria's mother pulled her aside. "He's good," she said simply. "You picked well." Victoria spent New Year's with Alan's family, which was quieter but no less warm. Cindy Melwood had apparently decided to approve of their relationship, though she made pointed comments about appropriate workplace boundaries that made Alan roll his eyes. Lauren, Alan's twin sister, video called from Austin with her golden retriever and spent an hour interrogating Victoria about her intentions. "If you hurt him, I know people," Lauren said cheerfully. "That's not reassuring," Alan said from off-screen. It wasn't meant to be reassuring, it was meant to be informative. But Lauren had winked at Victoria before hanging up, so it was probably fine. Work was more complicated. Amy and Susan maintained their cool distance, though they'd stopped making comments after Alan made it clear, professionally but firmly, that his personal life was not up for office discussion. Some of Victoria's colleagues were genuinely happy for her. Diego high-fived her in the hallway. Mark from IT gave Alan an approving nod. Fernanda asked Victoria for cooking tips. But there were still whispers, still looks. Still the occasional comment about dating the boss's son, about special treatment, about whether Victoria had earned her position or just slept her way into it. It hurt. But it hurt less when Alan was there, when he made it clear to everyone that Victoria's work stood on its own merits. She got promoted 3 months into their relationship, a move that Cindy insisted was based purely on Victoria's innovative campaign for one of their major clients, but which still prompted rumors. "Let them talk," Alan said when Victoria expressed frustration. "You know the truth. I know the truth. That's what matters." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're calling a social climber." "No. They're calling me whipped." "Tyler asked if you'd put a spell on me." Victoria had to laugh at that. "What did you say?" "I said yes, obviously, and that I was very happy about it." They moved in together after 6 months, finding a place that was much bigger than Victoria's apartment, with enough room for both their stuff and a kitchen that made Victoria weep with joy. Alan's vintage cameras lined one wall, Victoria's family photos covered another. They adopted a cat from the shelter, a grumpy orange taboo that Alan named Rice and Victoria called our Rose, and they both pretended they weren't already talking about buying a house with a yard. Because they were serious. Victoria had known it from the start, but living with Alan confirmed it. He was everything she'd hoped for, kind and steady and willing to build a life together. He didn't balk at her traditional family values, he embraced them. He talked about having kids someday with the same enthusiasm Victoria felt. He fit into her world and welcomed her into his, and it was exactly what she'd dreamed of. At the 10-month mark, Victoria started wondering when Alan would propose. She didn't push. Her mother had raised her better than that, but she noticed things. The way Alan had started asking subtle questions about her taste in jewelry, how he'd had a long private conversation with her father after Sunday dinner, the mysterious shopping trip with his mother that he refused to explain. "You're being obvious," Rebecca said when Victoria called to discuss her theories. "I'm being observant. You're being obsessed. Just let it happen naturally." But Victoria had never been good at patience. She made lists of potential proposal locations, debated the merits of different ring styles, and may have accidentally looked at wedding venues online, just browsing, just in case. The second Christmas party at Circadia Group arrived faster than Victoria expected. She wasn't on the planning committee this year. She'd learned her lesson about overextending herself, but she'd offered to help with setup anyway. Because old habits died hard, and because she genuinely loved making events special, the conference room had been transformed again, this time with silver and gold decorations that caught the light. The buffet table was catered professionally, though Victoria had still brought a pot of biryani. It had become tradition, apparently. People expected it now. Alan found her by the windows, where she'd been watching Houston light up as the sun set. He looked nervous, which was unusual. Alan was confident in most situations, comfortable in his own skin. But right now, he looked like a man on the edge of something terrifying and wonderful. "Hey," he said. "Can we talk?" "Of course. Is everything okay?" Yes. Everything's..." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm nervous." Victoria smiled. "I can see that." "Why?" "Because I'm about to do something I've been planning for 2 months and I'm suddenly terrified I'm going to mess it up." Her heart started racing. "Alan, wait. I have a whole speech." He took a breath. "Victoria Lopez, I fell in love with you at a Christmas party. Last year, right here, when you made biryani and told me you'd learned it because you wanted to make me happy. I fell in love with how resourceful you are, how determined, how you go after what you want with everything you have. I fell in love with your family and your values and the way you make me want to be better. I fell in love with your terrible Spanish curse words and your habit of reorganizing my kitchen cabinets and the way you cry at insurance commercials." Victoria was definitely crying now. Alan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and the world narrowed to just the two of them, standing in front of the windows with Christmas lights twinkling around them. "You picked me," Alan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saw something worth having, and you fought for it. Now I'm asking you to pick me again. Marry me, Victoria. Build this life with me. Have that big, loud, happy family you want. Grow old with me. Pick me, every day, for the rest of our lives." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was somehow exactly what Victoria would have chosen. Elegant but not showy, with a single diamond that caught the light. "Yes," Victoria said through her tears. "Yes, obviously yes. I've been waiting for you to ask for 3 months." Alan laughed, sliding the ring onto her finger. 3 months? I noticed you talking to my dad. And the jewelry questions? And that time you measured my finger while you thought I was sleeping. I thought I was being subtle. You weren't." He kissed her, and somewhere behind them, the party erupted in applause. Victoria had been so focused on Alan that she hadn't noticed the crowd gathering, but now she saw them. Her colleagues, Alan's mother, people she'd worked with for over a year. Some were cheering, some were crying. Even Amy and Suzanne looked grudgingly pleased. "Congratulations," Cindy Melwood said, embracing them both. "Welcome to the family officially." Victoria's phone exploded with texts, Rebecca demanding details, her mother asking when the wedding would be, her brothers sending variations of about time. She'd have to call them all later, would probably spend hours on the phone reliving every moment. But right now she stood with Alan, his arm around her waist, and looked out at the room full of people. Some had doubted her, some had whispered about her, some had called her a pick-me, a social climber, a woman who didn't deserve what she'd fought for. Let them think what they wanted. Victoria had picked Alan, and he'd picked her back, and they were going to build something beautiful together. The kind of love her parents had, the kind of family she'd always dreamed of, the kind of life that was worth fighting for. She caught Amy's eye across the room. The other woman raised her glass in a reluctant toast, and Victoria raised hers back. No hard feelings, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd been right all along. She'd seen something worth having, and she'd gone after it with everything she had. And in the end, that's exactly what being brave looked like.